HOV Villa del Prado, Madrid's mountains, 5:20 p.m. Diego Herrera, 42, a pharmaceutical giant, returns home earlier than expected and hears laughter from the living room. He approaches quietly and is taken aback by what he sees. His daughter Carmen, who doctors had said would be unable to walk for the rest of her life, takes her first hesitant steps toward the outstretched arms of Emma Morales, 28, whom the nanny had held just 2 weeks earlier. Diego freezes behind the door while his daughter, considered a lost cause by the best neurologists in Europe, laughs and walks as if it were the most natural thing in the world. What you will discover about Emma and her revolutionary methods will forever change your view of medicine, love, and miracles. Villa del Prado stood majestically in the mountains of Madrid like a jewel of Spanish Renaissance architecture, surrounded by gardens that seemed painted by a master of the Golden Age. Diego Herrera had acquired that historic mansion after his pharmaceutical company became one of the most influential in Europe, transforming it into a haven where modern luxury blended with the elegance of the past. But within those golden walls lay a tragedy that no heritage could cure. Carmen was 5 years old and had never walked. Born prematurely due to complications that also took the life of her mother Isabel, the girl had been declared by the best neurologists in the world as affected by severe cerebral palsy that forever compromised her mobility. The medical verdicts had been relentless. I would never be able to walk. He had to use a wheelchair for the rest of his life. It was better to resign myself and concentrate on what I could do. Diego, who had built his empire by selling hope in the form of revolutionary drugs, found himself completely powerless in the face of his daughter's condition. He had consulted the best specialists from Madrid to Switzerland, financed experimental research, and transformed a room in the villa into a private clinic equipped with the most advanced technologies in the world. Nothing had worked. Carmen was a lively girl with a contagious smile, long brown hair, and green eyes that shone with curiosity despite her physical limitations. She had learned to move skillfully in her custom-made wheelchair, painted pink with butterfly decorations. But Diego saw in her eyes the question he never dared to ask. Why couldn't he run like the other children? The nannies had come and gone in the villa like changing seasons. Some had been excellent professionals but cold. Other caring people are ill-prepared to face the specific needs of a child with a disability. All of them, however, had accepted the medical verdict as an immutable fact, concentrating on daily care rather than the possibility of improvement. Diego himself had finally given up. His days were divided between business meetings where he decided the fate of millions of patients worldwide, and afternoons at home, where he felt like the most failed father on earth. He could cure rare diseases with his medicines, but he couldn't help the one person who really mattered. It was a Friday in September when the elite domestic agency approached Emma Morales, 29 years old, a physiotherapy graduate specializing in pediatrics, with impeccable references from the best Madrid families and specific experience with children with special needs. Diego accepted the interview more out of duty than hope. He needed someone to look after Carmen while he traveled for work. Emma arrived one Sunday morning with a small suitcase and a smile that lit up her whole face. She was a woman of medium height, with blonde hair gathered in a neat ponytail, dressed simply with natural elegance. What immediately struck Diego were her deep blue eyes, full of a determination he had never seen in the other nannies. When Emma explained her work philosophy to him, Diego thought it was too idealistic to be effective. He spoke of hidden potential, of mind-body connection, of miracles born from patience. They sounded more like the words of a visionary than a serious professional, but Carmen instantly adored her. The girl, normally shy with strangers, began chatting with Emma as if she had known her all her life. He showed her his doll collection, the drawings hanging in his room, and told her about his favorite stories. Emma listened with complete attention, asked genuine questions, and laughed at Carmen's witticisms with a sincerity that touched the heart. Diego hired Emma that same night more because of the effect she had had on Carmen than out of conviction about her unconventional methods. He didn't know he was about to witness the greatest miracle of his life. 2 weeks had passed since Emma's arrival, and Diego had noticed subtle but significant changes in Carmen. The girl was more lively. She laughed more often. She had acquired a confidence she hadn't had before. What I didn't know was that Emma was working with her daughter, using methods that went far beyond simple assistance. Every morning, Emma transformed Carmen's playroom into a movement laboratory. She never called what they did together exercises but magic games. Carmen, sitting on the soft carpet, learned to make her legs fly like butterflies, to swim in the air with movements that stimulated dormant neural connections. Diego, when he was present, watched these games with skepticism. The doctors had clearly explained to her that Carmen's neurological damage was permanent, that certain brain connections were compromised forever. Seeing Emma encourage her daughter to move her legs seemed cruel to him, almost like feeding false hopes. But he couldn't deny that Carmen was happy. The girl eagerly awaited the time for the magic games with Emma. She laughed during the sessions. She had begun to daydream about when she would run through the garden. Diego was torn between wanting to stop those illusions and the joy of seeing his daughter so full of life. Emma had also introduced a completely new routine. Instead of just pushing Carmen's wheelchair, he encouraged her to use her arm muscles to move independently. She had transformed movements around the house into adventures, and Carmen enthusiastically propelled herself towards each destination. The muscles in his arms had visibly strengthened, and with them, his self-esteem. The nights were dedicated to foot theater. Emma had invented stories where Carmen's feet were characters who had to learn to dance. The little girl lying in bed wiggled her toes following Emma's stories, laughing when the foot characters did funny things. Diego had heard the neurologist say that those movements were just meaningless reflexes, but Emma maintained that every small voluntary movement was a brick in the construction of a miracle. One night, while having dinner alone in the large dining room, Diego heard prolonged laughter coming from the upper floor. He went upstairs silently and stopped in front of Carmen's half-open bedroom door. Emma was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, telling a story, encouraging the characters with different voices. Carmen was lying face down, propped up on her elbows, and followed the story with wide eyes of admiration. But what startled Diego was seeing Carmen moving her legs rhythmically as if she were walking lying down. Emma didn't comment on the movements. She incorporated them naturally into the story. The princess was moving her legs like that because she was running through the magic meadow. Diego walked away confused. The doctors had said that those movements were just involuntary spasms, but something in Emma's attitude made him think that she saw something that the others had overlooked. On Friday of the second week, Diego was scheduled to travel to Brussels for a meeting with the European Commission about his new experimental drugs. It was a crucial appointment that could be worth hundreds of millions of euros, but for the first time in his career he hesitated to leave home. I couldn't figure out why, but I had the feeling that I was about to miss something important. The meeting in Brussels was magnificent. The Commission approved 3 of its new drugs for the treatment of rare diseases, guaranteeing the company huge profits and, above all, the possibility of helping thousands of patients in Europe. It should have been the happiest day of his business career. However, all he wanted was to go home. The plane landed at Madrid-Barajas 2 hours ahead of schedule. Diego decided not to tell Emma about his early return. I wanted to surprise Carmen. Driving through the Madrid mountains towards Villa del Prado, he felt strangely excited, as if he were about to discover something that would change everything. I didn't know how right he was. It was 4:30 in the afternoon when Diego silently opened the main door of Villa del Prado. The sunlight filtered through the large windows, creating plays of light on the ancient marble floors. The house was enveloped in serene tranquility, but what he heard made him stop dead in his tracks. Laughter, genuine, joyful laughter, which I hadn't heard since Isabel had died. The voices were coming from the large hall, which had been transformed into a playroom for Carmen. Diego tiptoed over and stopped behind the half-open door. What he saw completely paralyzed him. Emma stood in the center of the room, arms outstretched forward with a radiant smile. 2 meters away from her, Carmen was getting up. Her small hands pressed against the ground, the muscles of her legs, those legs declared to have no motor function, visibly contracted to support her. Carmen took a hesitant step forward, then another. Her feet planted themselves firmly on the ground with increasing determination as she laughed with that crystalline laugh that was the most beautiful sound in the world, approaching Emma's outstretched arms step by step. Diego felt his knees giving way. Her daughter, who had undergone all kinds of medical tests, was getting up on her own. Her legs, described as neurologically compromised, were supporting her. When she reached Emma and threw herself into her arms, they both burst into liberating laughter that filled the entire village. Emma lifted her up and spun her around in the air while Carmen screamed with joy. Diego leaned against the wall, tears streaming down his face. What he had seen challenged everything he thought he knew about medicine, about the limits of the human body. His daughter had walked. They hadn't been perfect steps, but they had been real, voluntary steps, impossible according to each medical diagnosis. Carmen saw her father and her face lit up. She freed herself from Emma's arms, stood up, and began walking towards him. Every step was a revolution. Diego knelt down and opened his arms. When Carmen threw herself into his arms, Diego hugged her as if he never wanted to let her go. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now we continue with the video. She cried uncontrollably as her daughter whispered in her ear that Emma had said feet can learn to walk if you tell them the right stories. Diego looked up at Emma, who was watching them with tears in her eyes, but also with concern. I knew that what I had witnessed raised questions that went far beyond traditional medicine. Who was Emma Morales really? How had he achieved what the best specialists had declared impossible? That night, after putting Carmen to bed, who kept recounting her magical adventure, Diego and Emma sat down in the great hall. The fireplace crackled softly while outside Madrid shone with thousands of lights. Diego had opened a bottle of his best Ribera del Duero wine, but neither of them had touched the glass. The silence was heavy with unspoken questions. Diego looked at Emma as if he were seeing her for the first time, trying to reconcile the image of the gentle Nanny with that of the woman who had performed a medical miracle. Emma broke the silence by explaining that what she had seen was not magic, but the result of weeks of work based on scientific principles that traditional medicine often overlooked. Childhood neuroplasticity was much more powerful than neurologists were willing to admit. While Emma was talking, Diego was discovering her true story. She wasn't just a nanny. He had a PhD in neuroscience from Cambridge. She had worked at an experimental clinic in Zurich, specializing in impossible cases of infantile cerebral palsy. His methods had obtained results that defied all medical expectations. Emma had abandoned her academic career after a tragedy. Her brother Mateo, paralyzed in a traffic accident at age 16, had regained the ability to walk thanks to her revolutionary methods, but the medical community had refused to acknowledge the results, marginalizing her from the academic world. She had decided to work as a specialized nanny, privately helping families with children considered lost causes. Carmen was his 7th little patient. The previous 6 had shown significant improvements. Diego remained silent, absorbing revelations that challenged everything he believed in. He, who had built a pharmaceutical empire on traditional science, was faced with evidence that there were more effective approaches than his expensive treatments. Emma explained why she had not immediately revealed her identity. Experience had taught her that wealthy parents often preferred prestigious diagnoses to the hopes of a woman working outside the official system. Diego understood why she had been marginalized. In the world of modern medicine, an approach that worked without generating huge profits was dangerous. His methods cost almost nothing: time, patience, love, and scientific competence. That night Diego walked for hours through the corridors, thinking about Carmen, who was sleeping after performing the miracle, about Emma, who had given up a brilliant career to help children, about himself, and about the role in a system that perhaps failed those who needed help the most. In the morning she had made the most important decision of her life. The months that followed that nighttime revelation radically changed life in Villa del Prado. Diego transformed the entire East Wing into a private experimental clinic, equipping it with the best technologies for neuromotor rehabilitation. But the real revolution was the completely new approach that Emma had brought. Carmen continued to improve day by day. His steps became more confident. She ran through the villa's corridors, jumped on the living room sofas, and danced in the garden under the moved eyes of Diego, who still found it hard to believe the transformation. Diego had secretly begun to fund Emma's research, transforming part of his company's laboratories into centers for studying childhood neuroplasticity. The first external case arrived through word of mouth. Maria Benitez, wife of a famous surgeon from Ramon y Cajal, had heard rumors about the miracles of Villa del Prado. His son Francisco, 8 years old, was quadriplegic after an accident in the swimming pool. Emma agreed to help him under strict conditions: total confidentiality and no external medical interference. Diego watched Emma work with Francisco exactly as she did with Carmen. After 2 months, the child was moving his fingers. After 5 months, he could sit up on his own. After 6 months, the parents cried as they watched him take his first steps. The news began to leak out in Madrid's medical circles. Diego received accusatory calls from university professors and fellow businessmen, but also desperate calls from parents all over Europe who refused to accept the medical verdicts. The decision came one spring afternoon, while having dinner in the garden with Carmen and Emma. Carmen said that she had run with her classmates at school and that she was the fastest in the class. Diego looked at his daughter, who a year earlier had been in a wheelchair, and realized that he could not keep the miracle to himself. The next day, he called a historic press conference. In front of journalists, doctors, and dozens of parents with disabled children, he announced the founding of the Herrera Center for Child Neuroplasticity. He presented the cases of Carmen and Francisco, showed videos of the transformations, and illustrated the scientific basis supported by his laboratories. Above all, she announced that she would donate half of her fortune to make the therapies free. The reaction was explosive. Medical colleagues accused him of betraying serious science. Specialized magazines published editorials against false hopes. But thousands of parents from all over the world began calling, presenting themselves with their incurable children. Emma, a reserved nanny, found herself at the center of an international debate that divided the medical world, but she only cared about one thing: the children who continued to improve, proving every day that miracles are the result of love, science, and the conviction that no case is lost. 5 years had passed since that press conference that shocked the international medical world. The Herrera Center for Child Neuroplasticity had become a world reference with branches in 12 countries and a waiting list of thousands of families from all continents. Carmen, now 9 years old, had become the living symbol of what determination and love could achieve. Not only did she walk perfectly, but she had also begun to practice classical dance, fulfilling the dream she had nurtured since childhood. His videos, posted on the center's social media accounts, had gone viral around the world, inspiring millions of people to never give up in the face of difficulties. Diego had completely transformed his pharmaceutical company. Instead of focusing exclusively on profits, it had redirected much of its research towards developing innovative therapies for childhood disabilities. Her laboratories worked closely with Emma's team to develop standardized protocols that could be applied worldwide. Emma had become the center's scientific director and one of the world's most renowned pediatric neuroscientists. He had published 3 books on his methods, given lectures at the most prestigious universities, and trained hundreds of therapists in his revolutionary approaches. But what filled her with the most pride were the 847 children who, thanks to her methods, had recovered motor functions that traditional medicine considered lost forever. The center's success had attracted the attention of international institutions. The World Health Organization had commissioned a study on Emma's methods, and the results had been so convincing that the WHO had recommended the integration of her techniques into standard pediatric rehabilitation protocols. But the real revolution was cultural. The Herrera Center had demonstrated that an approach based on love, patience, and the conviction that every child deserved a chance could achieve better results than expensive and impersonal therapies. Thousands of therapists around the world had begun to apply Emma's principles, transforming the way society viewed childhood disabilities. Diego and Emma had also found love. 2 years earlier, they had married in an intimate ceremony in the garden of Villa del Prado with Carmen as bridesmaid. Their marriage had been born naturally from sharing a common mission of mutual respect and the awareness of having witnessed a miracle that had changed their lives. They had a son, Marco, who was now 1 year old, and whom Carmen adored like a precious little brother. Seeing Carmen play with Marco, running after him when he started crawling, carrying him when he cried, was for Diego daily proof that miracles really exist and that sometimes they come through the people you least expect. One summer afternoon, while the family was having dinner on the terrace of Villa del Prado, overlooking the Madrid mountains that turned pink at sunset, Carmen asked a question that made everyone smile if they remembered when she didn't know how to walk. Emma took Carmen's hand and explained that it wasn't important to remember when she couldn't walk, but to celebrate everything she had learned to do since then. Diego, lifting up Marco, who was laughing happily, added that every child has within themselves the ability to perform miracles. He just needs someone who believes in him enough to help him discover it. That night, as they put the children to bed and sat in their favorite living room gazing at the stars through the large window, Diego and Emma knew they had created something that went far beyond their family. They had shown the world that true love is not just what is felt, but what is transformed into concrete action to change the lives of others. The girl who would never walk now ran free through the world, carrying with her the message that no dream is too big when you have the courage to believe in miracles and the determination to make them come true. The Herrera Center continued to grow, helping more and more children, training more and more therapists, and changing more and more lives. But for Diego, Emma, and Carmen, the greatest miracle was still the everyday one. Waking up each morning, knowing that love can truly move mountains, and that sometimes the mountains are called impossible. If this story of real miracles and life-changing love has moved you, like and subscribe for more incredible stories that will make you believe in the power of determination. Tell us in the comments, have you witnessed any miracles in your life? Do you believe that love can truly overcome any medical obstacle? And don't miss the next video where you'll discover another extraordinary story that demonstrates how hope can change destiny.